Business Report. I'm Shilpa Kannan in Delhi. Later this week, Narendra Modi's government will present its first full budget. On this week's program, we'll be looking at what that speech might contain and asking people in business what they'd like to see.
Besides the government's commitment to make the goods and service tax happen by April 2016, we also want to see some policy directions on how the government is going to simplify and clarify the tax laws in India.
Also coming up in this week's program, fuel for growth. Can the government follow through on its promises to cut subsidies on fuel and gas?
I think that's going to be very important for the government to dwell on. Unless and until we are able to convert the non-productive expenditures into productive expenditures, India would still be grappling with some of the stress.
Food for thought. Investors are pouring millions into the country's newest food startups. But some fear it could all go bad.
Let the money come in. It's good for the entrepreneurs. But I think the investors, many of them, are going to get their fingers burnt.
And taste of success. We meet the young woman who brought the macaroon to Mumbai. But first, the budget will be delivered here in the Parliament in Delhi next Saturday. After Narendra Modi won a decisive mandate from the electorate to fix the economy, the pressure's on for the government to deliver concrete change. So what might the government do? We've been taking a look. The things we might see in the budget, but what does business really hope to come out of it? Well, we've been speaking to company bosses from a range of industries and asked them what one thing they'd like the finance minister to do.
Indian products can be world-class, provided we get a little assistance from in the budget from the government of India to support the Indian automotive industry. We need a lot of capex in equipment to be brought in to make world-class products, world-class quantity, world-class quality to get the efficiencies of scale of production. But our interest rates are much higher than abroad. So if we have a 5% interest concession, then maybe we can be gutsy enough to import the machines and make in India.
The IT and services industry of India have a few asks. You're probably aware that India now is the leading country in terms of the number of startups created last year. I think one of the asks to the government is to really encourage these startups by giving them a 3 or 5 year tax holiday so that they can become more effective. The second would be to create incentives for companies to take the model into the tier 3 and tier 4 locations and drive skilling programs for talent so more people can get jobs and be effective.
In terms of taxes, there is a lot riding on hope on this budget. Besides the government's commitment to make the goods and service tax happen by April 2016, We also want to see some policy directions on how the government is going to simplify and clarify the tax laws in India. All the long pending issues in terms of the dispute resolution or transfer pricing or in terms of indirect taxation in India, they all need to be addressed, and the government needs to come out with some concrete measures as to how it is going to make it easier for the foreign businesses to do business in India.
As a multinational working in India for more than 100 years, one of the things that comes in the way of development in the country is the lack of infrastructure. It reduces the efficiency of the operation, it makes production, etc., a lot more expensive. And therefore, we would like to see in the budget, how will the government find the capital to build infrastructure? How will it do it without increasing deficit too much, so that interest rates are within control, so that the cost of building infrastructure is reasonable? And how will it make doing business easier by trusting business more as opposed to monitoring them all the time?
Well, one thing people across the country want is cheaper gas. But the government is under pressure to save money by cutting subsidies on food, fuel and fertilizer. So what will it opt for, lower subsidies or lower prices? Sameer Hashmi has more from Mumbai.
This red-colored gas cylinder, commonly known as LPG, is used by millions of households across India to cook food. The government supplies this at a discounted rate compared to the market price. And for people like Poonam Jadhav, the subsidy is crucial to be able to afford the cylinder.
I earn $90 every month, but my expenditure is more than that. Right now, my husband is also not working due to bad health, so I'm taking care of all the household expenses. And if I have to pay the full market price for the cylinder, then I won't be able to manage my monthly expenditure.
Now, every household in India with an LPG connection, irrespective of the social or economic status, receives 12 subsidized cylinders every year. But now, the government wants to provide this subsidy only to those families that are poor and cannot afford to pay the full price. The subsidy cost the government nearly $7 billion last year. To ensure that cheap gas only goes to those who need it, the government has rolled out a new scheme under which it will directly transfer the subsidy in the form of money to bank accounts. This method would also help in identifying those who actually need the subsidy. But removing the subsidy for those who can afford to pay the full price could be a big challenge.
The whole idea of government finances is how do we minimize the non-productive expenditure, either by capping the total amount or by improving the mechanism of distribution where subsidies come to fore. I think that's going to be very important for the government to dwell on, because India needs to kickstart investment, and unless and until we are able to convert the non-productive expenditures into productive expenditures, India would still be grappling with some of the stress.
The government has given itself 5 years to bring in the new distribution system. If it does succeed in identifying those who need cheap gas and delivering it to them, that could help the Treasury save up to $1.5 billion annually. Funds that Asia's third largest economy could use far more productively elsewhere.
With the economy slowly getting back on track, there are calls for the government to take bold steps, both to revive growth and to get the public finances back in order. So what should the government be doing? Harsh Mariwala, the chairman of Marico Industries, produces a range of products from hair color to cooking oil in factories across India, Bangladesh and Africa. Sameer Hashmi met him and began by asking, how crucial is this budget for the Indian economy?
I think it's very crucial because the whole world has been waiting for this budget. There have been a lot of promises. But I think you need now some action in terms of how do we move forward. So considering the key themes which the Prime Minister has enumerated as earlier communications, whether it is Make in India or whether it's Clean India, I think the budget has to give thrust to these key themes. So from that angle, it's very important to give the right signal within India as well as outside India. So I would say it's very, very important.
Now, Harsh, talking about this particular budget, if there are one or two key areas which you want the government to address, which would be crucial for the economy going ahead?
They will have to give thrust to the Make in India initiative, which is how do you accelerate manufacturing in India so that the overall contribution of the manufacturing sector over a period of time goes up from its current level of 16% contribution to GDP to 25% contribution to GDP. But that will take some time, but I think this budget will be the first step where some initiatives or a combination of initiatives will be announced which will make India a better destination for manufacturing. So I think that's number one priority for the budget. Now looking at that, what apart from certain duty structures, how do you improve infrastructure? How do you improve the ease of doing business? How do you revive the investment cycle? I think a whole set of initiatives to drive this Make in India is very, very crucial.
But how are businesses and investors going to judge whether this budget was a success?
You have to look at key themes. You know, if the government gives thrust to those key themes, I think to that extent. So what are the key themes? Fiscal deficit. Is the fiscal deficit going to be in control? The government last year had a target of 4.1. I don't know what it will arise. Will it be lower? Number two, is there going to be a flip to newer investments by the government itself in public sector undertakings or through the private sector undertakings by giving some incentives for investments which will revive the investment cycle? The third thing is I want to talk about simplification of taxes. Because a lot of time goes into actually getting this rebate and this incentive. But if the government reduces the tax rate, individual tax rates in international economies are on an average about 25%. In India we have 33%. But we also have exemptions. So can we do away with exemptions and arrive at a flat rate of 25%, which is simpler to monitor, simple to administer?
Now, the government has announced a lot of initiatives in the last few months, but have they really taken off the ground? And do you think the government needs to do more?
I think we need some bigger action, because I think what is happening was government has cleaned its past in terms of past pipelines were rusted. The pipelines have been cleaned to some extent. Now you need to put up new pipelines, to drive economic growth. And I think that's where we need some big action. There's a lot of talk about a lot of black money lying outside, black money lying within the countries. Should we have an amnesty scheme? I'm just giving some new thoughts. I'm not saying that they should do that, but they have to think out of the box to revive economic growth and to take some big steps.
Harsh Mariwala, chairman of Marico Industries there. Right, it's time now for us to take a short break, but when we come back, India's food delivery business is attracting money. But how long will it be before investors taste success?